Everyone just loves to complain about the lack of persistent lobbies. It's easily one of the most complained about things in Battlefield 6. You see it in all the socials, you see it in the comment sections, people just screaming that EA took it away. But that is a complete misunderstanding of how these games are actually built and delivered today. The lack of persistent lobbies in the last two titles, that would be 2042 and Battlefield 6, wasn't an accident or an oversight. It was a calculated business and design choice. And if you actually look at the data, a bulk of it was directly based on player feedback and how players actually behave when they play. Players say they want a classic experience, but their gameplay telemetry tells the developers something entirely different. We're going to get nerdy here, kiddos. If you have a goldfish level of an attention span, you're on the wrong channel. But Hannibal! Shut up, kid. No one cares. Let's look at the actual corporate logic behind why EA dropped persistent lobbies starting with 2042. Let's look at the actual corporate logic behind why EA dropped persistent servers starting with 2042. Because Christ almighty, if you're gonna bitch about something, you might as well understand what you're bitching about, kiddos. World at your fingertips and yet can't be bothered to look shit up. First, it is entirely about skill-based matchmaking controls. Yes, Battlefield 6 does have an SBMM, but it is primarily implemented for team balancing rather than strict lobby-wide skill matching. Battlefield's SBMM system considers ping, location, server availability, and skill level to create fairer team distributions. Now, whether this reflects your overall experiences in team matches is a different debate. The intent is one thing, execution of that intent is something entirely different. The system aims to prevent these one-sided games, but players have reported mixed experiences, which some state it makes some matches a bit sweaty. Okay, let's talk about that sweaty feeling for a minute, because this is where the execution of non-persistent lobbies actually clashes with player enjoyment. In a traditional persistent server from the old days, skill was completely randomized based on whoever happened to click on the server in the browser. You might get a couple of competitive gods, a bunch of average Joes, and a handful of absolute noobs. It created a diverse ecosystem where you could relax and just mess around. This is why we don't see this whole fucking skill gap thing anymore, kiddos. The way SBMM is implemented in the last two Battlefield titles is a massive reason why that traditional skill gap feels like it's been vanished for a lot of veteran players. The gap was highly visible. If you were a good player, you could actively feel your superiority because you were constantly playing against people statistically worse than you. You could mess around with weird loadouts or snipe casually and still dominate. By recalculating and reshuffling teams after every single match to keep the skill levels tightly coupled, the algorithm actively tries to ensure that no single team gets steamrolled. It pushes players into the middle to high skill brackets to keep the matches close, and the algorithm expects you to carry your weight at 100% effort every single time. The visible skill gap shrinks because everyone you are playing against is being balanced to match your output. And a lot of players complaining about this lack of skill gap are what we might call mechanical elitists. They believe a skill gap should only be defined by high recoil control, fast movement mechanics, and aim precision. Those twitch reflexes, if you will. When developers designed games with lower recoil or faster time to kill to help casual players stand a chance, these hardcore players rage that the skill gap is gone. But the reality is that Battlefield has always been a casual arcade shooter at its core, not a hyper-competitive tactical simulator. I don't care what Ender says. The real skill gap is a game with 64 to 128 players isn't just about who can flick shot the fastest. It's about positioning, timing, map awareness, and squad teamwork. Remember, EA is a business, guys. The top 1% or 5% of hyper-skilled players who demand massive skill gaps are a vocal minority on the socials and interwebs. The other 95% are casual gamers who play a few hours a week after work. If a stack of high-skilled players gets into a lobby and just farm casuals over and over again, those casuals are gonna log off and stop buying skins or battle passes. The SBMM system is designed specifically to hide that skill gap and protect the casual player from getting stomped. It creates artificial guardrails so that everyone feels like they're having a competitive, close match, even if that means the better players have to sweat their dicks off just to win. So when players complain that there is no skill gap, what they are really complaining about is that the algorithm won't let them easily dominate a lobby full of casuals anymore. They have to play at 100% capacity just to stay afloat. Boo-hoo. Anyway, by forcing a re-queue after every single match to recalculate team balance, the algorithm creates what I call a sweat locker paradox. Because the system is actively trying to ensure that no single team gets steamrolled, it pushes players in the middle to high skill brackets into a perpetual state of high alert competition. To keep the match close, the algorithm expects you to carry your weight at 100% effort every single game. You just can't just lean back in your chair and casually snipe from a crane anymore. If you slack off, the finely tuned balance collapses. By trying to protect the casual player from getting stomped by a stacked squad, the system accidentally turns every standard match into a high-stakes tournament for the rest of us. Let me put it in simpler terms here. By reshuffling the lobby after every single round, the system forces a re-queue. It prioritizes that connection, that ping I just mentioned, and server availability first, with skill as a secondary factor to balance the teams. That allows the algorithm to reevaluate the player's performance after every match, prevent stagnation and lopsided games, and keep skill levels tightly coupled as much as possible. They do this to prevent experienced stacked teams from dominating newcomers, aiming to retain those new players via a more controlled experience. And again, there are reports of varying experiences here, with some players finding the team balancing to be quite strict in certain game modes, especially the smaller ones like CQB, Squad Deathmatch, and Gauntlet. To a publisher like EA, a protected casual player is a player who stays in the game's ecosystem longer, filling out the active player base and potentially buying battle passes or skins. Simple economics. Everyone talks about the good old days of Battlefield 3, Battlefield 4, when persistent lobbies existed, but forgot a lot of players noped out of those stacked lobbies. No one in their right mind wants to keep losing over and over again to a perfectly stacked up team. So after a match or two, they'd go and find a different lobby. And then those stacked lobbies were all like, where'd everybody go? The data show that persistent servers actually caused server death because players and teams who kept losing, they left and no one wanted to backfill a losing match. Gamers say they want a challenge, but their actions showed publishers that if they consistently lose a match by more than a few tickets, they'd go to a different lobby or close the game entirely. That is the telemetry I was talking about. EA is simply designing around player behavior and low frustration tolerances. It's also about infrastructure and cost efficiency. Utilizing transient servers on platforms like Amazon's web services allows servers to spin up and down dynamically on demand, saving massive amounts of money on idle, persistent servers. EA is a corporation after all. They may make record profits, but they also got to pay record level bills. Running dedicated, persistent physical servers 24/7 is an expensive legacy model that doesn't scale. Keeping empty servers spun up over any length of time is just simply expensive. Like leaving a light on in a room in your house and no one is in that room all fucking day. Wasting the bulb and wasting the electric bill. And for what? Let's look at the actual dollars and cents on how corporate cloud architecture works, because people don't realize just how much it costs to host massive 64 or 128 player instances. When EA uses AWS or similar cloud services, they aren't paying a flat monthly fee like you do for Netflix. They're paying by the hour, by the gigabyte of data transferred, and by the compute power utilized. I'm not making this shit up, guys. I've worked in IT and data centers. This is exactly how clouds run their service models. In a persistent server model, if a 64-player conquest server drops down to 10 players at 3 a.m., that physical or virtual server is still eating up the exact same amount of corporate processing power and costing EA the exact same amount of money as it did when it was full at 8 p.m. It is a massive drain on resources, and y'all are already bitching about the cost of RAM as it is. By switching to transient, non-persistent instances, the second a match ends, that specific virtual server is instantly deleted, like a virtual Windows desktop. The compute resources are handed back to AWS, and EA stops paying for them. The game then pulls the remaining active players into a fresh, fully populated queue. From a purely financial and logistic standpoint, persistent lobbies are a massive waste of overhead in the modern live service era. See, I'm giving you another reason why we shouldn't have done live service. Remember when I mentioned the virtual desktops just a few minutes ago? If you leave a bunch of heavy-duty applications running for 3 weeks straight without ever hitting the restart button, what happens to them? The systems start to crawl. The RAM gets bogged down, background processes get stuck, and the overall performances take a massive nosedive because the background processes bog it down. A Battlefield server left running for 18 hours straight, and nobody's in it, gets bogged down by tracking hours of gameplay data. But Hannibal, what about the bots and standard moves? The bots contradict what you just said. No, kiddos, it doesn't. As a matter of fact, it reinforces the overall point of getting into your matches faster. If you have one person hanging out in a lobby at 3 a.m., then there's a ton of bots to populate. If you have 7 others in a different lobby, that one player will be transferred over with the other 7, and less bots to populate, and that server the one player was in disappears. It's about efficiency, and efficiency is cheaper for everyone involved. When I say efficiency, I mean you are getting into a match faster and EA is paying less to host it. It's a win-win on paper, even if it does kill the community vibe. By switching to these transient, non-persistent instances, EA is essentially giving the server a hard factory reset after every single match. The second that match ends and the scoreboard disappears, that specific virtual machine is instantly terminated. It's wiped from existence. And all of those compute resources are handed right back to AWS Cloud Pool to be used by someone else. In regards to the overhead, corporate infrastructure in 2026 just doesn't operate on that kind of legacy model anymore, guys. They are trading your sense of community for a lighter server bill and a cleaner technical execution. EA saves money, less cloud services wasted, and less time on players' parts sitting around not playing the game. It's more on your end to build that community than it is for EA. EA makes games. People make communities. Based on top of saving the company money, periodically refreshing the server instances helps mitigate persistent bugs or memory leak issues that happen when a server runs for far too long. They're actively solving technical problems that player telemetry showed them were causing people to log off. Go back to Battlefield 3 and Battlefield 4 again. One of the biggest complaints for the persistent servers was admins needing to refresh their server because it just kept running non-stop 24 hours a day. Without a hard refresh, game netcode degraded. Hit registration got muddy, and physics started to get wonky as the server's RAM got bogged down by hours of destruction data and gameplay. Think about how much data a modern Frostbite engine game generates. Every destroyed wall, every crater in the ground, every physics-based debris object going into the water has to be tracked by the server and synced across all 64 players in real time. In older titles, after a persistent server ran for 12 to 18 hours straight without a reboot, that stored data would create massive memory leaks. The server tick rate would degrade, leading to those infamous moments where you'd run behind a concrete wall and still somehow die from a bullet fired 3 seconds ago. And there's a shit ton of evidence to look at here online. You could literally see all of this nonsense in uploaded video footage on YouTube from back then. The difference is most of us laughed at this tomfoolery and we just kept playing. Nowadays, the kids are gonna rage about it. Meanwhile, admins would get bombarded with player messages about not loading in, respawn was buggy all of a sudden, taking longer than normal or usual to either respawn or load in, long queues. Christ, I remember going into my favorite servers and either having to wait in line for a long period of time or waiting for people to show up just to get the match started.
Let's move!
Now, there are some players out there that have criticized the lack of persistent servers because they prefer to build community, engage in a specific map rotation, and avoid having to go back to the main menu. And I get that frustration. Playing with the same rivals across a 4-map rotation was the soul of classic Battlefield. A specific server acted as a digital community hub. You knew the admins, the regulars, and the written and unwritten rules. Shifting to a sterile, algorithmic-driven matchmaking system turned a social game into a disconnected grind. It makes squad play feel like a series of one-night stands where you never see the same person twice. But you have to look at the other side of player behavior. Players absolutely hated waiting in lobbies. The non-persistent server system aims to avoid dead servers entirely. Instead of holding you in a lobby waiting for it to fill up, the matchmaker pushes you directly into new full games much more quickly. It's another reason we get the bots. Faster load-in times, faster match starts, less waiting around. But let's be honest about the psychological impact of filling these non-persistent lobbies with AI bots, because this is where that disconnection feeling really hits home. When you are force dumped into a fresh server instance, the game uses bots as a buffer to make sure you aren't sitting in an empty queue. On paper, that sounds great. You get right into the action. But psychologically, killing a bot doesn't feel the same as killing a real player. There is no real sense of accomplishment unless you use them to work challenges and such. I do this all the time. Let me get my challenges out of the way, and then I'll go find a ton of real players afterwards. Part of my warm-up routine. In the old persistent servers, if a specific player kept sniping you from a distant roof, a rivalry was born. You would spend the next 3 matches hunting that specific motherfucker down. And when you finally got them, it felt amazing. You felt like you conquered a real human opponent. When half the lobby is made up of randomly generated AI names running around in predictable patterns, that human connection is completely severed. You aren't playing a community-driven multiplayer game anymore, you're playing a glorified target practice against an algorithm. NPCs. The convenience of getting into a match at 15 seconds flat isn't worth the cost of stripping away the soul of a multiplayer experience, and I get that. But there's also a huge price of developmental history people seem to always forget. The development of the core all-out warfare mode was heavily influenced by the hazard zone extraction mode, which inherently used non-persistent lobbies. To elaborate on this specific point, we need to mention the open secret of Battlefield 2042's development, which was, it was originally built to be an extraction shooter battle royale hybrid, and hazard zone was the heart of it. When you look at the DNA of the game mode, things that made zero sense for classic 64-player conquest mode, it made perfect sense for a small squad extraction mode. But it never happened. But because that architecture for Hazard Zone was baked so deeply into the game's foundation, it just carried over. If you want to know the real reason the engine doesn't support persistent lobbies anymore, you have to look at how the game was actually built from day one. This massive piece of development history people often ignore. 2042 was heavily rumored and widely understood by industry watchers to have started development as a battle royale or extraction style game, not a mode. Hazard Zone wasn't just the side mode. Its design structure was literally the entire project. We almost got a full extraction shooter as a Battlefield game, guys. Imagine the pitchforks and torches and plowshares turned into swords if that timeline actually happened. Fuck me. In extraction shooters like Escape from Tarkov or Hunt Showdown, which Hazard Zone was directly competing with, by the way, you don't have persistent lobbies. The entire gameplay loop relies on building a squad in the main menu, buying or picking your gear and your specialist, dropping into a fresh instance to extract data drives or loot, getting wiped or successfully extracting, which immediately kills that server instance and pushes you back to the main menu to spend your currency and re-queue. Because that lobby to match to lobby cycle was hard-coded in the game's core pipeline. DICE built the entire user interface and server infrastructure around that. When they shifted gears late in development to make traditional all-out warfare, your conquest and breakthrough, the main focus again, they didn't rebuild the netcode from scratch, because we all know what happens when they do that shit. They kept the non-persistent lobby system that Hazard Zone required and just scaled it up to fit 128 players. That is why the specialists have individual gadgets, why there was no traditional class system at launch, and why there is no server browser in the main game. You are playing traditional Conquest on an engine and lobby system that was designed from the ground up to be a high-stakes, one-and-done extraction shooter. It's also a big reason 2042 didn't come with a campaign. The developers were trying to create this BR extraction hybrid, and EA thought it would work on its own merits. When they pivoted back to what we were given, it was too late to develop it or build a campaign. Now, I know some of the kids out there are already raging in the comments because this challenges their belief system. It's easier to just blindly scream that EA is lazy or EA is evil than it is to actually understand the complex pipeline of game development. No amount of facts or corporate telemetry is going to fix a closed mind. People say they want the truth, but their behavior shows they just want their anger validated. But for my hood rats who are actually listening and want to understand how the sausage is made, remember, it's not the dev's fault. This lies solely at the feet of the suits. And sure, we could talk all week about those choices and how it may have hurt the franchise, but you need to remember, again, it's not the dev's fault. It only lies at the feet of the suits. And I'm sure very few of them even played video games, like ever. They were seeing the trends of other games' successes and wanted a piece of that pie, and I understand that. It's business to them, not entertainment. The truth is, the persistent server crowd actually has an option. It's sitting right there in Portal. The toggle exists. The problem isn't that EA refuses to give it to us, it's that Portal isn't the main development priority right now. For Portal to truly be the community savior everyone claims they want, EA would need to step in and provide some updates to make it a viable, seamless replacement for the core matchmaking. Portal shows more promise than any other feature in Battlefield 6. The problem is that the bulk of the player base wants XP and progression with that experience. And that's fair, I guess. Maybe not too much of an argument here. Where I would push back on this is the lack of enthusiasm on both EA and the players. EA is busy with their acquisition and corporate upheaval and all of that entails. And the player base wanting Battlefield 4 in Battlefield 6. All sorts of changes to things outside of real issues. And a lack of player interest of varying degrees and missing progression mechanics in Portal. But Hannibal, no one really plays in Portal. Well, duh. Portal isn't getting the love and attention I believe it deserves because the data shows most players just queue for standard matchmaking anyway. The suits follow the numbers, not the angry social threads. EA is hesitant to give Portal full XP progression because they are terrified of farming servers and bot lobbies exploiting the system. That's not unreasonable, as that's exactly what happened in 2042 and what was happening in Battlefield 6 before they slammed the lid down on it. For Portal to truly be the community savior everyone claims they want, EA would need to step in and provide some updates to make it viable, make it seamless, and make it so it could be a replacement for the core matchmaking. It's about EA giving Portal the updates it needs to become part of the thriving community hub. And look, I get why EA is terrified of flipping the full XP switch on Portal. We all remember what happened when custom experiences launched previously. The server browser was instantly flooded with thousands of 10,000% damage, fast XP, bot farm lobbies. Players were maxing out their weapons and battle passes in an afternoon by shooting stationary AI in a corridor. It completely broke the progression economy EA spent millions of dollars designing. But I agree that holding the entire feature hostage because of a few bad actors is a lazy solution. There are ways to fix this if the suits actually wanted to invest the developmental time. You could easily implement a system that dynamically scales XP based on server rule sets. If you have a lobby with 100% health, standard damage values, and no forced AI bots, give it full progression. If someone turns on instant respawns and lowers player health to 10%, you dial that XP gain down by 80%. The logic isn't complex, the math is already there. It just requires the publisher to actually prioritize community-driven infrastructure over their rigid corporate matchmaking algorithms. They need to trust the players to build their own ecosystems again rather than trying to force everyone through the same sterile, algorithmic-driven funnel. But Hannibal, you said EA isn't responsible for building communities, the players are. You're right, I did. But there's a huge difference between a gaming company like EA providing the tools for us and doing all the work for us. We shouldn't be asking for the keys to the kingdom, kiddos. No, we should be given the blueprints and then go build it ourselves. If that's not to your liking, then why the fuck are you playing video games? At the end of the day, EA chased tighter skill brackets, cheaper server bills, and faster queue times because that's what the broad player base behavior demanded. Was that trade-off worth it for you? Let me know in the comments. Christ almighty, I hope this provides some much-needed understood context for the knuckle-draggers in the back, pissing and moaning about shit they barely understand or don't want to understand. And for my hood rats, I hope this was insightful. It's not easy making video games, is it? I mean, if it was, we'd all be doing it, right? Shit, man, when I read code, it gives me a freaking headache. It's literally a different language, and it's complex, and it's complicated. I did simplify things here, but I did so for multiple reasons. But I'm happy to dive into specifics if you ask me in the comments. That's how we do here. Start the conversation with the video, then carry it over to the comment section. So, if you want to know more, or have questions about what I said here, you know where you can find me. We are steadily marching to the road to 3K for subs, folks. If you are new here, or hell, if you're a regular and haven't fully committed yet, like some weird relationship hang-up, consider subscribing. What is lacking in community within the game itself can be made up in places like this. Like I said earlier, we could build a community, not the suits. It's also why I have a Discord channel. Sub here, join us there. We talk mad shit while we shoot shit in Discord. We're learning musical tastes, movies and TV show viewing habits, players playing other games. There's a ton of social shit going on in there. If you're interested in joining the Discord, hit the link. If it's not working for you for whatever reason, just let me know. We have merch, folks. Recent purchases have been mugs, t-shirts, and decals. If you're looking for supporting the channel, the merch store is a good place to start. Hint, hint, wink, wink. Memberships are open again, another way to support the channel if interested. And you can find me in-game if you want to squat up and commit war crimes. Lastly, there's a ton of links for channel support and socials in the video description, but at the very bottom is this month's new veteran support group spotlight. There's a short bio and a clean link for you if you are interested in supporting our troops. I do these spotlights every month, so check them out. And check out this video here if you want a bigger nerd dive into the back end things like we discussed today. And until the next one, out.